I'm a true believer in promotion, prevention, like upstream healthcare, that kind of stuff. So as soon as I saw that there may even be an issue, even if there wasn't, I'd rather get him the support he needs to be as successful as he can be. So that's kind of why I pursued looking into getting an SLP.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication disorders. It is a production of the Communication Collaborative. My name is Greg O'Grady, and I am a person who stutters and your host. Some Stutter Law aims to rebuild confidence and hope for people who live with communication differences by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers. For more information about the Communication Collaborative or this podcast, you can find us at Some Stutter Law. If you only get one thing from this podcast, we hope it's this. It's okay to stutter and it's okay to communicate differently. It's not how we communicate that's important, it's the message that's important. Today, Some Stutter Law welcomes Ashlie Khaladkar. Ashlie is also my niece. Today, Some Stutter Law will be discussing a speech disorder called apraxia, childhood apraxia. Ashlie has a young son, Odin, that has apraxia. Now, Ashlie, I've also asked Ashlie to read her introduction because it's only appropriate to hear her introduction from Odin's mother. So, Ashlie, welcome.
Thank you. Sure, I'll bring it up here now. So as Greg mentioned, my name is Ashlie Khaladkar, and I'm originally from Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. I work in the field of human resources, and although I completed my studies in kinesiology and health studies with a focus on Indigenous health promotion and policy, I am working in the human resources field. I completed my post-secondary education in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I spent 17 years all over the province there before returning to my home province of Newfoundland last year with my husband Jeremy and our two beautiful children, Eliana, who's 5, and Odin, who's 3. So with regard to Odin, my husband and I welcomed our hardworking, sensitive, smart baby man, which is what my daughter called him when he first arrived in January of 2019. And right from the get-go, he was a force to be reckoned with. He immediately loved his big sister and watched and mimicked her at every moment and every opportunity he could, as soon as he was able, of course. This was how I first noticed he wasn't as verbally communicative as his sister was at about the same age. So it was probably around the 15-month mark when I became somewhat concerned about Odin's speech. Obviously, it's said to never compare two children. However, I couldn't ignore that at checkups with the doctor. It wasn't an easy yes when asking about his word count, unlike checkups with my daughter. I started paying more attention around the 18-month mark. I felt that it really wasn't improving the way Eliana's had when she was younger, so I started looking into options. I found a private SLP in Saskatoon that was able to see Odin once every month or so, starting in October of 2020. So there's definitely some concern that he wasn't meeting speech milestones at that point, but no official diagnosis, likely because of his age. He was a bit too young for a diagnosis then. So since moving home and securing unbelievable SLP support based on recommendations from our SLP in Saskatoon, we received a diagnosis almost immediately, and then our journey really began. So Odin was diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech, which in and of its name, they don't grow out of. It's not just it's really usually just diagnosed in childhood. So ever since then, we've been working hard to support our strong-willed baby man at every turn. So our family and friends have been truly amazing by learning whatever they can to help and support and do what's best for Odin. But ultimately, Odin's really impressive. Like, his work ethic, intelligence, and patience is really the reason why he's so successful. So I'm really excited to be part of this podcast today to share our story and hopefully support someone with their journey as well.
Thank you very much, Ashlie, for sharing that lovely introduction. For our listeners who are not familiar with apraxia of speech. I did some research, and on Google, of course, where Google has all the answers.
All of them.
And apraxia of speech, AOS, also known as acquired apraxia of speech, verbal apraxia, or childhood apraxia of speech, CAS, when diagnosed in children, is a speech sound disorder. Someone with AOS has trouble saying what he or she wants to say correctly and consistently. AOS is a neurological disorder that affects the brain pathways involved in planning the sequence of movements involved in producing speech. The brain knows what it wants to say but cannot properly plan and sequence the required speech movements. Now, there are two types of apraxia of speech: acquired apraxia of speech and childhood apraxia of speech. So correct me if I'm wrong, Ashlie. Odin has been diagnosed with childhood apraxia of speech,
Yeah.
and childhood apraxia of speech is present from birth. This condition, development, verbal apraxia or articulatory apraxia, childhood of speech, is not the same as developmental delays in speech, in which the child follows the typical path of speech development, but does so more slowly than is typical. The causes of childhood apraxia are not well understood, and imaging and other studies have not been able to find evidence of brain damage or differences in brain structure. So, Ashlie, how is Odin doing now? Now, I understand that he
Uh,
is in speech therapy.
yeah, so when we moved here, we were able to find two wonderful speech therapists actually that we were able to work up to about 3 times a week private speech therapy sessions for anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes a session. And that's really what they say is the best thing for children who've been diagnosed with CAS. And so we were attending 3 times a week. His speech has improved dramatically. It's really just about a lot of repetition, hard work, and working on it all the time. So it's a lot of teaching parents and family members and friends or people that are close to you how to support him or best support him to be able to communicate. He's doing wonderfully.
Great to hear, Ashley. Actually, can you share a little bit about how your speech journey to become aware that there's something more different about Odin's speech? Can you share a little bit more about that
Yeah, for
journey?
sure. Yeah. So really, honestly, it came down to having a child that was a little bit older, and Eliana was very, I don't even know, like fluent really early. Her speech was phenomenal. Honestly, people would comment on how articulate she was early on, and so having a second child. And around, I think I would say that, like I said in the introduction, probably between the 12 and 15 month checkup whenever we had that. Again, now COVID had hit during all of this, so like even just getting in to see physicians and stuff was a little bit more difficult. When they asked, like, is his word count at this, at whatever, appointment we were at, I really struggled to sit down and say, like, yes, for sure. Or, with Ellie, it was never any problem. Like, they were like, is her word count at this? And I was like, yes, well beyond that. I had to sit down and actually think about what he was saying, how many words he was saying. I noticed, like, if he was hitting, it was barely. So early on, he was barely hitting those milestones. And I did notice, like, as an infant or, a baby anyways, he didn't do the same, like, babbling and things that my daughter did. So from a, like, expressive communication, like through verbal communication, I found he was not as verbally expressive as my daughter, which I've since learned, I believe is an indication of childhood apraxia of speech or verbal apraxia. So Yeah, I just kept an eye on it. And everyone told me, like, just give him some time. Sometimes boys are a little bit later speaking, and, all those types of stereotypes or things. I don't even know if they're stereotypes, to be honest. Like, they could be true, but there was just something that kind of hit that made me pursue it. So once we hit about that, like, 18-month mark, and I was like, this is, I don't know, I'm a true believer in promotion, prevention, like upstream healthcare, that kind of stuff. So as soon as I saw that there may even be an issue, even if there wasn't, I'd rather get him the support he needs to be as successful as he can be. So that's kind of why I pursued looking into getting an SLP.
Mm-hmm. When you first spoke to your doctor about it, what was his response again? This person's response?
They just said keep an eye. That was pretty much like the communication I think I received from our family physician. And so there was no such thing as a referral at that point. He was so young, and a lot of times even, I'm sure speech language pathologists would be able to give a better indication of when they would do testing for this. But everything I'm seeing from, different support groups that I'm part of on Facebook or whatever else, it's usually after the 2-year mark and closer to the 3-year mark where the kids are being formally diagnosed with this. And it is diagnosed with somebody, an SLP who is familiar and can do the testing or whatever. So, I just looked into an SLP because I felt like even if he was just a little bit, like the language wasn't coming easily to him without a formal diagnosis, I was like, what can it hurt to try to get some support for him? So that's why I did what I did. I don't think anyone really thought there was going to be any concern. He was otherwise like incredibly healthy, right? There was no other concerns. There's no behavioral issues. There's no, there was nothing else of concern, I guess, that had come up. So it was just like, it could just be a little bit longer where he'll kind of take to speech. And a lot of times you hear it all the time as well about older siblings talking for the younger children. So Eliana was able to help him express what he wanted versus him saying it himself. So there was a little bit of maybe that's what's happening here, maybe there isn't. But I was like, if anything, if we go to see an SLP, then, if there is anything wrong, at least it'll be caught early.
Mm. When you first worked with a speech language pathologist, and I believe before you moved back to Newfoundland, there was some question that there wasn't a formal diagnosis.
That's right.
Or was
yeah.
There? So
no.
Why was that?
I think because of his age. There was a lot of, we think that there's a speech, the neurological thing happening. And there was a speech delay in some contexts, but I hadn't even heard the term apraxia until I met with an SLP here. Although the words that the SLP chose to use when I was looking for somebody here and refer me to an SLP here, like a motor speech disorder or potential motor speech disorder, that's what she started looking for SLPs here that were trained in prompt. So different types of training specific to being successful with apraxia. So when she said motor speech disorder, then that was confirmed on this end when I started seeing an SLP here that said, yes, it's an apraxia of speech or childhood apraxia of speech. And that totally fit. Once I got to learn about it, and as time went on and they started using prompt, the prompt method, I guess, is probably, I have no idea how to even really say that. Once they started using prompt, then you could see that he just started to do quite well. His word count jumped dramatically. His expressive speech was amazing. Yeah, huge difference in a short period of time when it was kind of almost labeled and or diagnosed and then supported appropriately.
Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more, Ashlie, on what prompting means from a
Yeah.
SLP perspective? Or?
So I'm actually just going to look up while I'm on.
Google.
Because I know, yeah, exactly. Google is like lovely. So it's a technique. So actually what it stands for is prompts for restructuring oral muscular phonetic targets. And so SLPs assess and treat individuals holistically by approaching communication as an interaction of the physical, sensory, cognitive, linguistic, and social emotional domain within the conceptual framework. So that's how it's described there when it first pops up on Google. But what I've noticed is when SLPs are working with him, he's right now struggling with the f sound. They'll go f, and so that reminds him, like, they'll say things like bunny teeth. So it reminds him to put his top teeth on his bottom lip to make the f. So when he says feet or foot or fight, because normally what he's done to adapt, because he hadn't had that sound, is he uses S sounds. So instead of fight, it'd be sight, which obviously has completely two different meanings, right? So in context, most people will pick up on what it means and what he's trying to say. I don't know, maybe not most people, but that just seems to be the common, what I'm hearing back is people are still understanding him, but prompt will like help remind the child. So like if it was O sounds, I've seen them do like O, things like that to try to help with the lips. They'll mimic it a lot themselves, and so there's lots of eye contact, close contact, and then they'll actually use touch to help support the muscular, what needs to happen with the muscles in order to produce the sound that's needed for the word.
Slightly off topic, Ashley. Just listening to you now. You are a quick speaker, quick talker.
Yeah, I am. Yes, and I'm nervous, so I speak even more quickly.
Okay, because I'm curious now. When I'm sure you have a lot of to do a lot of therapy with Ashley with Odin at home. Are you more conscious now of when you're working with them in terms of slowing down your pace? No, the reason why I'm saying that, the reason why I'm saying is, sorry for cutting off. As a person who stutters, I find that you see, I always succumb, and I've been working with this for years now. That to really sort of not to allow a person who has a quick space in speaking to overwhelm me, because when I'm trying to work as honest, I mean, that's me. It's not the speaker's fault. It's me, but it's as if I'm trying to sort of really sort of concentrate on slowing down my speech so I can use my targets, and not allowing the listener to overpower me. I'm just wondering now, has that, well, are you sensitive to that with Odin?
So, first of all, I know you said it's not my fault, but like it's not your fault either. So I know that we all have our differences and all that fun stuff. But I do. So I'm conscious now. I know I'm nervous. So when I'm on camera or I'm public speaking, I do speed up. I'm very aware of that from like my professional life. Or even in university when I was told to slow down because they couldn't understand me as a Newfoundlander when I went away. So I think with Odin, so the tough thing is I'm more, how can I put it? When he's speaking, I just need to ensure I allow the time for him to say what he needs to say, because he is, and this is the thing with apraxia, there's he hasn't now, and he hasn't obviously verbalized this to me or illustrated that, with children in general, sometimes you do need to slow down and allow them the time to process and communicate. But he fully understands everything that everyone's saying all the time. There's no concern with input. So I'm not as concerned, or I don't necessarily think about the speed of speech, more so ensuring I allow the time for him to take it in like any other child, but then allowing him even extra time to be able to communicate back. And not unlike with stuttering, you don't want to fill in words for him. He just needs to be able to be provided the time to figure out that motor planning piece.
Ashley, when you first heard the diagnosis of apraxia, what was your response?
What did I do wrong? I think that was like a little bit of guilt from a mom perspective. I think that's probably really normal. Like, did I not take enough supplements to support his neurological development? You do everything. Like, did we not spend enough time? But like, it was you do that piece. I think that's a pretty normal thing for any mom to question if they could have done anything differently that would have changed the outcome. But then I think it came down to, like, very quickly came down to, like, once I started researching, it wasn't about finding out why. It was more about how do we support him the best we can. And so it was just do anything in our power to support him to be able to be as communicative as he can be.
Based on the research here, actually, it says that the childhood apraxia of speech is a rare but severe motor speech disorder that affects less than 1% of children. Are there any support groups for parents or family in the Newfoundland or St. John's area?
I haven't found anything locally, but I haven't fully looked locally. I have had a friend that I worked with in one of my previous lives. Her daughter had been diagnosed, so it was kind of nice to just even connect with her. But there is an online, there's an online support group for grandparents. So I've opened that up and let my parents and my husband's parents know that that's there, and I believe they're part of those groups on Facebook. I'm part of an apraxia of speech general group, so there's lots of communication happening there. I think originally it seems like majority of the people on there are from America, so the systems are a little bit different and those types of things, but you can kind of if you can take it and do a comparative to what services and everything's available here in Canada or Newfoundland specifically, then it is really helpful. And even just different bodies of research that they can put you onto. And as well, there's the, oh my goodness, it's out of America as well, but it's an apraxia nonprofit. And so they do, the walks and everything every year, fundraisers. They're there as a support when it comes to if you need a device to help support the verbal communication piece. So they have there's lots of resources there as well. So I've come across different groups per se or resources that I try to keep on top of, or at least touch base with to kind of see where things are at. But really my main resources are the SLPs that we work with.
So Ashlie, you were saying that when you first heard the diagnosis, you felt a lot of guilt. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
Sure, as long as I don't start to cry, I can definitely elaborate on that. No, I just think there's nothing that tells us where this comes from. And so there's lots of, you wonder what you didn't do right, or if you should have done something differently, or if you didn't get the care necessary during your pregnancy. There was a lot of questions that I couldn't answer because I didn't know what happened, what went wrong, or and really I've changed my mindset, of course, quite a bit, because it's nothing's wrong with my child. He's absolutely wonderful in every way he is. But You always want the best for your kid, and anything that would make life a little bit more difficult is really tough, like, right from the get-go. So you just do the whole, what could I have done differently? Did something go wrong? Did something I didn't catch, or you just internalize a lot, trying to figure out what you could have done differently so that you didn't have the exact same outcome. But there's looking and being part of the group online on Facebook, I noticed lots of parents go, I shouldn't say lots, I've seen instances in which parents have gone and gotten so much testing done. Their children are, trying to figure out what exactly caused this outcome. And to me, once I got past the guilt, it was just about, this is who he is, and this is what we've been dealt, and that's not a bad thing. It just means that he's going to need a little bit more support. And how do we support him the best way we can so he can be as successful as possible? Like, he's a phenomenal child. Like, obviously you know him, Greg. So it was, even talking with SLPs and getting, like, we were so reassured when they first met him and said, he doesn't get frustrated. Like, they have seen other children get frustrated who can't express themselves well, and sometimes you'll see behavioral issues come out of that. But he didn't have those same level, or didn't have those, like, behavioral issues, because they said every SLP said, like, he's incredibly intelligent, and so he was able to communicate in other ways that allowed him to not be as frustrated, or he was able to control his frustration because he was able to communicate with us the way he needed to in order to get his needs met in whatever that looked like. So he was very much, he would take my hand and bring me to something if he couldn't say it. And then, like, I knew what he wanted, because he was just so good at using physical means to get it, or hand movements, gestures. Sister knew sometimes what he wanted before mom and dad knew. So he's just a really intelligent kid that, so I knew as soon as we started, like, any bit of support, like with SLP or any of those sessions, he started to flourish, because he was given the tools to be able to say what he wanted to say. And that was huge. So the guilt, there's still moments of guilt, but I'm never really going to get any answers. So at some point, it's not about that. It's about him and how successful he can be. So just move forward.
Ashlie, do you have have any advice to give to other parents with children with apraxia? What advice would you give them?
Oh gosh, I think one thing would be to trust your gut. If I had $1 for every time someone said to me, like, oh, it's fine, he's just, it's, his speech will come, or, he's so young yet, don't worry about it. Man, I'd have a pretty healthy savings account, I'm sure. So I think a lot of times you just need to trust your gut. Your instinct, your child better than anyone knows your child. And so just listen to yourself and do what you feel is the best way to move forward. There's just so many opinions. I think do your own research. Again, I'm a true believer in solid research and looking for the right type of research, and from, whether it's peer-reviewed journal articles or whatever. I go to those types of places first to find my information, or I go to professionals that know more than I do, which is a lot. So I go to those, like, I do that kind of stuff. Just inform yourself and do what's best for your kid.
Where would families find this online support group?
Okay, so on Facebook,
Is there a specific name?
I don't even have to search for it now. Yeah, I'm just bringing up it's called Apraxia Kids Official Support Group is the group I follow. I also follow, what is his name? Jordan is his first name, but he says Fighting for My Voice, My Life with Verbal Apraxia. He is a phenomenal advocate for people with apraxia. So he is, an adult now, talking about it and talking about the challenges he had and the sports he had and what he's doing. And he's an advocate now, like he steps into, like people can hire him to support, because there's not a lot of information. So educators, it seems as if, and again, like I said, a lot of the groups I follow are based out of America. So the lack of knowledge or understanding of the condition is minimal. So, having the appropriate resources at your disposal to be able to advocate for your child when they are school age, those types of things. I also follow SLP Mommy of Apraxia, Dyspraxia, Dyslexia. So it's a mother who is an SLP who had a child with apraxia. And there's just, Apraxia Kids, I think, is the name of the organization that I also follow online. And they have tons of research and tools and that kind of stuff that you can look to if you're looking for some guidance. Yeah.
So Ashlie, what is the prognosis for Odin now? Has your speech therapist talked about that prognosis?
Yeah. I think everyone's a little bit nervous because you don't want to jinx anything. But he's, the last conversation I had, and it was really, really awesome, is that if he continues with the work he's doing now and how successful, if he stays on the same path, it's highly likely that Odin may not need additional supports by the time he hits school. So we've obviously been doing a really intensive private sessions or whatever. I have reached out to try to get some public support, just because it is quite pricey to have a child, even with really great benefits plans. It doesn't really cover the cost needed to attend to see a SLP 3 times a week, or even twice a week, or even once a week. It's very minimal. So I'm thinking that's the hope, is that, and that was always my goal, is if I can have him to meet the milestones that an average or normal child would be meeting from a speech perspective by the time he's in school, then I think we're ahead of the game. And that's where, so far, my understanding right now, the only sound he doesn't have for a 3-year-old is the F sound. And that's the sound he's working on. So he does correct himself often. He reminds himself, or if he says things like sight instead of fight, which is not a word we use often, but either way, sight, or soot instead of foot. I just go and he'll say foot. So he's picking up on himself. So he's just worked really, really hard, and he's been really successful.
Ashlie, I'm laughing laughing in my mind at the moment, because for a person who stutters, for people who stutter, we often talk about the F word. We call it the fluency word.
Yeah.
And the F word is so challenging and it causes. I'm talking about Greg O'Grady as an adult who stutters, that we get so caught up in fluency that it sort of creates a lot of discomfort emotionally and psychologically. So this is why it's only about a few months ago that I was attending a group, and one of the participants, a young lady, a registered nurse who had a severe stutter, and she sort of talked about the F word, and I thought, oh, where's this conversation leading to? And she said that I'm talking about the fluency word, because we get so caught up in fluency that we forget that there's so many definitions of fluency. You know what I mean? And so I've leaned towards managing my stutter, not the fluency. The fluency is a byproduct. The most important thing is managing versus fluency. So this is why, I mean, this has triggered a lot of segue. Yeah. Ashley, you mentioned that you follow a gentleman, Jordan, who is an adult.
Hmm.
Does apraxia still affect his professional personal life? And if so, can you share?
That's a good question. So I watch videos with him, and so I can tell that I would think yes, it does affect his his life. Um, I think he's used it obviously to like. It's just been his experience and his understanding of the um, societal things that exist or structures that exist and how to navigate that is been phenomenal, right? His way of navigating through because of his experiences is a great way to advocate for kids now. So from that perspective, yes, I do. You know, when he's speaking, he does speak in very intentionally, and for somebody who speaks really quickly, he speaks slowly. But he's like his enunciation and his ability to communicate is great, right? Like you can have, you know, I can he has a conversation or he posts something and I am engaged. I'm fully can hear everything he's saying. Nothing is out of, you know, it's not his enunciation and all the like the consistency of the words. He's able to get the words correct every time he speaks, right? Just takes a little bit of time. So I think it would still impact his life. But I'd hate to speak on his behalf as well because that's his lived experience, right? And I think if you do follow him or if you want to take a look at it, it's worthwhile to. He's just such a phenomenal advocate, and I wouldn't want to put words in someone's mouth. It's just a really interesting take, especially to see like somebody as an adult living with it and what they've done. He's done some pretty great things.
I'm wondering, actually, with your involvement now, with the whole world of apraxia, do they use the word disability? Has that been used at all? Is apraxia considered a disability, or is it on the fence?
I've used the word disability. I have no idea if it's actually considered a disability or not. Like if it would fall, I don't even know what the um, the guidelines to be considered a disability, but I would consider it. You know, if you have other neurological concerns, sometimes those you know would be considered, I would think, a disability. So I've just associated myself, which is maybe not the right thing to do, but it doesn't. Yeah, to me, like that, I don't know. Maybe the word itself doesn't bother me either. Like I think I'd rather people understand that he has difficulty trying to speak and allow him the opportunity than to pretend like it's nothing, like something's not there, if that makes sense. But I don't know, like,
Yeah. It actually makes sense, actually, because as a person who stutters now, as senior, that I never even thought about stuttering as being a disability until the Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association was asked to join, become a member of a disability group. And it's interesting that so there's a lot of discussion back and forth, and so I reached out to a lot of people that don't know who stutter, and there's a gamut of there's a 50-50. It's like a board of directors. Some people say yes, it is a disability. Some people say that it's not a disability. So you're right. We're so caught up in the definition. However, stuttering is part of the Charters of Rights. It is considered a disability. But if you speak to individual who stutter, that it's you get so many different opinions.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Ashley, I'm wondering now. You also answered one. You also alluded to one of my questions. In terms of cost for speech therapy, that is a definite challenge. Like, is there any subsidies available for apraxia
Um, so
treatment? I mean.
I haven't, besides like government supported SLP services, which I understand here in the province of Newfoundland, anyways, like you apply or you're referred. You can do a self referral. So either way, you get referred. I have been told that I'll get a response between 1 and 6 months or 1 and 4 months after I have applied. And then my understanding of somebody else who's kind of been through the program, there's about an 8-week block of like one session a week or whatever it looks like. I don't know if they prescribe it per child in need and those types of things, but there's like an 8-week block of time in which you're provided services. And I don't know if that's annually. I would suspect it's annually, but again, I haven't been through it yet myself. So that's to come. Hopefully, will be accepted into that and get to experience that. Because honestly, the way I see it at this point is any SLP support that he can get, the better it is. But when it comes to private, like we were doing 2 45-minute sessions a week and 1 30-minute session. Our 45-minute sessions were, I think initially when we started, it was $95 for a 45-minute session. And I'm not sure if it jumped. We stopped. We just, honestly, we couldn't keep up. So the 45-minute sessions, we dropped to 30-minute sessions. The 30-minute session was either $70 or $75 per 30 minutes. And we were trying to do it 3 times a week. And then with some changes with our SLPs that we work with, we dropped to twice a week. And right now we're doing once a week for a half hour. Now he's been working on the same sound, the same F sound for some time, and he is doing really well. We also thought maybe over the summer I do believe in giving the child a break as well, like constantly having that level of work being done. Like he puts in a lot of work just to speak on a daily, right? So like that's a lot of work for a 3.5-year-old to do year round. So taking some time away and allowing him to recharge and just work on things as we're playing or conversing or whatever at home, I think is a break is as good as anything else. No, not unlike us at work, we all need breaks too. So he'll be going back into a couple of sessions a week within the next month or so. And then I'm hoping to continue with at least 2 a week up until he starts school, with like the little breaks here and there. 3 times, my understanding is 3 times a week is essentially like the minimum you would like to be doing. But financially, I'm not sure how people can afford it, to be honest. But, with childcare costs and all the other things that go into raising a family, it's not cheap.
Yeah, actually, this is a change. This is the same challenge that I have. The Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association. That there's a definite need for for a subsidy for stuttering, because stuttering is a lifelong. It's a lifelong challenge, and this is a definite gap that we have identified within the province. Now, when you talk about you have applied for government assistance, is that for speech therapy and finance? Is it all rolled into one? You get 8 sessions?
Oh, it's just for the SLP. So I don't, we're fortunate. My husband and I have great jobs, and we have great benefits. But we've blown through our benefit allotment. I don't know, usually within like the first month of the year, we've gone through that. And so, it's just for the 8 weeks. It's just for the government. My understanding with the government's SLP services is it comes in 8-week blocks, but I'm not sure if it's like annually or if you can get that like twice a year or what. But so that's what we've applied for.
So how would families or individuals with speech challenges, like the researchers, find this link or something? It's a maze. It's a
Oh,
maze to
okay.
find things like this.
It is. And that's like, I just started searching. So I did have my physician refer us. I believe it had to be twice before they received the referral. I also called the Janeway like SLP or like speech center. Let me just actually, if they have two, there's the Janeway's Children's Health and Rehab Center. And I think whenever I've called in, I've gotten like if something has happened and is acute. But I've called and then been redirected to the line that I need to actually talk to. So that's usually what I do, is I just start calling, and that's what I've done in order to find or get to the right person where I can like self-refer. So I've had my physician refer twice, where finally it went through, and I've reached out twice myself. The first time I don't believe I received the documentation to self-refer. The second time I did. A lot of it, like they did start sending things through email because of COVID. Because before, I believe a lot of things were sent through mail. But either way, finally, when my physician referred, there was a little less paperwork that I had to complete. So then I completed what I needed to. And if it didn't get it back within, I think it was like a 4 or 6 week time frame, it would just be, dismissed essentially, or like not, like it didn't exist. So I made sure I hit the timelines and got my paperwork in order for him to be put on a wait list and then to be looked at for intake, which I believe they do intake in September.
So Ashley, would you be able to elaborate on like criteria as for preschool, school age, adolescents, adults, let alone seniors?
So I don't. Yeah, I only went through the process for Odin, and he's obviously like preschool. I had to complete with the physician referral, they sent in the referral. Obviously, like he had originally asked for documentation from my SLP, but my SLP told me that that would be a charge to me to have her write essentially the referral for the physician to go right, whereas he didn't necessarily need that. So I did have the physician send it in without additional support from the SLP. But then I had to complete paperwork about what I believe the concerns to be, what we're doing to support it, all that kind of stuff. And then also any other caregiver, which normally is like the preschool or daycare or whatever, also had to complete paperwork. So I completed paperwork. I brought the other paperwork to our daycare. They completed paperwork. I retrieved it from them and sent everything in through mail in order to be received. And then I followed up when I hadn't heard anything in about a month. I followed up asking if everything had been received, because I did have the email contact from the time I tried to self-refer. And so I got hold of them and said, did you receive everything? They said, yes, you should be receiving confirmation of receival and like more information within 1 to 3 or 4 months. I think it was 4 months. So I'm hoping by the end of the year I'll hear something back, and then we'll hopefully get some sessions. That's the thing, right? Is a little bit of additional support.
Just listening to you, Ashley, as a mother, well, as parents of a child with with not only apraxia but other speech challenges, to have to go through all this maze, because just to explore available if there's any subsidy. What would you recommend to the government to make life easier for parents and families struggling to get services? Just to fine tune this process somehow, because as obviously you're doing a lot of searching on your own.
Yeah, and I think too, if there's a lot of people out there, like I work on a computer all day long. I can navigate, and how often do I come across a website that's no longer in use from a link that's like outdated? Like that stuff happens, right? But I think how to make it more accessible, I think that's like the biggest question, and I honestly don't know an answer for it, because having having a physician's referral, the first thing with something like this, my physician can't diagnose apraxia. An SLP would diagnose apraxia. And so, there's concerns with the system in and of itself. Like, I understand physicians have tons of training, and that's where we get a lot of our, you have to go through referrals for most things through a physician, but again, I could self-refer. So they've taken away that obstacle, I guess, or that access or lack of, like if I knew that my child had concerns, or if I thought there was concerns, I could self-refer as well. The navigation piece, I'm not quite sure how you would fix that, or even try to make it more accessible, because I just start calling. Like I've learned that, like, the more you call, and like it takes time and energy and all those things. And there was numerous times I was looking and I was like busy with something else. I was like, I can't do it now. I have to go do this. It just, like, you have to be your own advocate when it comes to healthcare, and I feel like it's always been that way, which is sad because people just aren't getting the care they need or require, right? But I'm not sure what that answer would be.
Yeah. So actually, mind if I ask now? You and your husband have good paying jobs, okay? The benefits package. Mind if I ask how much coverage do you get for speech therapy in a year?
Mm-hmm. So I believe I get $500 a year. So if you're paying $100 a session, that would give me essentially 5 sessions. And that would get me through a week and a half.
A week and a half.
Right, if you put it with what the recommendation would be for, to actually provide the appropriate, what's the word I'm looking for? Support for a child with apraxia. Treatment, yeah, appropriate treatment, exactly. My husband also gets $500 a year. So again, maybe we now have 3 weeks. Sorry, I get a little frustrated when I talk about it. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate in my last position, my last role, which was out of Saskatchewan, that I had a really wonderful benefits package where I had $500 for speech, but then I also had $1,000 of health spending money, which is some private enterprises have that. In a previous role I had $2,200 of money to spend towards anything. So if you use a lot of one type of care, so if you're doing preventative work, whether it's massage or chiro or physio or whatever it is that you're using, that money can be used towards to supplement that. Or say you have an 80% coverage for medical expenses, so whether that's your medication, that other 20% could be covered by your health spending account. So I was fortunate in my last role, so that gave me $1,500 of coverage for him. And then my husband actually held a second job for a while, so we had $500 from that. So we had a total of, I think, $2,500 last year kind of thing. So when you go from $2,500 to $1,000 of coverage, with both of us just working one job now, without any additional money in a benefits plan, and to be fair, $500 is a lot. That is not a lot when you think about what the need is for a child, but it's a lot because I know there's lots of plans that give $350. Anyways, and there's a lot of people that don't have plans. So, I consider myself really fortunate that we've been able to have that coverage. But honestly, I wouldn't know how you can do it if you don't have really good paying jobs with great benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is definitely a challenge for a lot of families that are single parent families, self-employed families. So it's a big. I mean, this is a definite issue of concern that needs to be placed under the lens of the government in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yes,
it certainly is.
Most definitely.
Actually, I'm wondering now. I was noticing that when I was doing research on apraxia, there appears to be evidence that genetics play a role. Now, you know that the stuttering runs in your father's family. I, as your uncle, have had a stuttering issue, which I've always considered myself to have a severe stutter. Has your speech pathologist or any like your previous speech pathologist talked about the genetic component in the family? Because remember, you have there's 6 boys and one girl in your father's family, and 4 of the brothers stutter. Now, has this genetic component ever been discussed?
So I actually just brought it up the last session, and I met with, because it was the first time we just had to change an SLP in our professional within the last couple of weeks, I guess. And so I brought that up. I said, on my dad's side, there is some stuttering. I understand like speech disorders could be like a genetic thing. And she said there's absolutely no linkage between stuttering and apraxia. With that being said, I am not aware of anyone in our family on either side that has been diagnosed with apraxia. That's not to say it's not there. And without getting into too much detail, my husband is adopted, so I don't know if there is any genetic ties on size or that side of the family that we're not aware of, right? So, but yeah, that was I asked just in passing, because that's, from my perspective, that's my experience, has been the stuttering, right, with the family. But I wasn't sure if there was any linkage between the stuttering and apraxia. But she did tell me there wasn't. But I just don't know then if there's where the apraxia could possibly come from.
It's interesting that I was just wondering, because when I read about the genetic factors and maybe a possible genetic, I thought, is there a link here with the family?
Yeah.
History of family, and I still, not being a researcher or a scientist, there's still a question mark on my side, in my head.
Yeah.
Now, Ashlie,
and who?
Before we close, and thanks again for all your time and patience with the technological issues, challenges today. Now, you're a very articulate person, and now from a person who does not stutter, what's your, I guess, perspective at this point? And you're also a member of the Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association. What's your perspective as a person that is fluent in terms of communication at this point? What's your attitude towards communication after being exposed to apraxia, a family, a history of stuttering?
I don't know. It can come in all different forms. I think everyone, for me, it's everyone deserves the opportunity to be able to communicate however they need to communicate, right? And so whatever supports can be, I think we're really lacking in supports when it comes to any concerns that do exist. But my attitude, like, I can't say it's changed, because I've always felt this way. Like, everyone communicates a little bit differently. And I think as long as there's, that understanding, I don't know. I'm a true believer that people should just treat each other kindly. This might be like really ridiculous thing to say, but I don't know. We're all people. We're all trying to do what we're doing, and we're all trying to communicate the way we need to communicate. So you just treat each other with kindness and allow people the opportunity. I don't know. I grew up like essentially privileged in this capacity. So when I look at my little boy, it's just give him some time. If he needs a little extra time to say what he needs to say, that's okay. Like I don't really know how else to answer it, because I just think we're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think there's. No, go ahead. That's okay.
Do you feel actually that there's a deficit in knowledge, information within the school system. Not only about stuttering is obvious, is that there's more work that needs to be done within school system to understand stuttering, but I was thinking about Odin when he starts school.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any discussion based on your experience with the support groups online, has that issue come up? Education,
It
teachers.
has, yes. Yeah, it has quite a bit actually. So the support group online, again, like I said, it's American, so their experience is a little bit different. Um, and I have spoken with parents that are, have kids around about my kid's age, or they're in like primary school, primary grades, that what they've gone through, in order to advocate for their children. Now I know, like, even just doing Kinderstart for my daughter, there was a session that talked about SLP services in the school and what that could look like. I've already started asking questions about, this might be ridiculous, but, standing up with the parents, waiting for my daughter to get out of class. I overhear one parent that I knew from high school say, that teacher is Mrs. Whomever. She also has a special education degree. She's phenomenal with kids with disabilities, and she's the kindergarten teacher as well. So I'm like, what's the name? Will I, like, should I advocate for my child when he's ready for kindergarten to be in that classroom with her? It's a lot of being really open, and being open that my child does have a neurological speech disorder and motor speech planning disorder. So which means being vulnerable, right? But then also being the advocate. So I see tons of concerns coming out of the group with regard to once they get in, what kind of supports they're getting. Again, it's American. I've been told here it's maybe not great, but it has been touched on, I know, in the Kinderstart sessions for parents who obviously might have some concerns. And I know parents, they're just doing what's best for their kids, right? They're communicating a little bit more. And so, like, once you start to have those groups and those networks and getting to know who's in what schools and those types of things, then I can start to navigate and advocate what's needed. But I think, like with apraxia, with 1% of the population being diagnosed, I think likely it's probably underdiagnosed based on things like, hey, just give it some time, it'll get better, from some of those stereotypes that you get. But it really isn't well known or researched, really, because it's such a small percentage of people diagnosed with it. So it's just I know, like, even some of the parents in these groups are sending letters into the classroom when their kids start school to the teacher, saying, like, my name is, like, letter that the kid could hand to the teacher saying, this is my name, this is for lack of a better term, this is my disability, this is how I need support, I need your patience, I need your guidance, I need time to communicate, I need these things in order to be able to have a really great experience and to be able to work on my speech and be able to communicate. So there's just lots of advocating. It's just another form of advocating for your kid, right? So I fully expect, and that's not that I also have a friend as an adult. She visited this past summer, actually, or maybe it was last summer already. Anyway, she visited and she had mentioned that she believed she had apraxia. I don't know if it was labeled for her or diagnosed, but she said she used to go to speech language all the time. Her parents were always bringing her. And as an adult, she's incredibly successful. Like, she's a geologist. She's done very well for herself. But speaking with her, I've always noticed, and again, being a fast speaker, that she's very deliberate and she's thoughtful. I always thought it as thoughtful, right? She's thoughtful in her words. She takes her time to communicate. But I think a lot of that is learned, because if you're managing a motor speech planning disorder, you do those things in order to create the consistency needed in order to be fluent, right?
Listening to you, Ashlie, I mean, it is great. I mean, it's great that parents are sending the letters to the teachers about the child's challenges. It's like stuttering. There's also a letter out to teachers about how to work with a child that stutters. However, though, the teachers need their own support as well. The whole education system needs to educate and support the teachers. And it's just not left up to the parents as well. So we have to work together collectively. It's the proverb that I use now. I think you may have heard it. Is that the old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. It actually takes it takes a care team, a community, and interdisciplinary care team to support a person who stutters, a child who stutters, and then that goes for Odin, apraxia. So so we really have to, instead of working in silos, we need to work together as a community, teachers, government, professionals, SLPs, because I think it's such a stress on parents having to do all this research online, whatever. So I think we need to come together as a community. Now this is great. Don't get me started on my soapbox.
No, I agree with you. I think like if I had my old professional hat on when I worked in health promotion, when you talk about interdisciplinary supports, there's no way that we can do it without that happening. And I think, from this perspective, I'm a mom raising a child with a speech disorder. And so in this capacity, I'm an advocate for him. And so, whatever that means, however I need to advocate, obviously if I could do it at a higher level, which is less in silos, that would be phenomenal. But, even just going through the part where we I tried to get the physician to refer, and then I self-refer, but then I was asked for the SLP to provide the referral to the physician there's no need. None of this, it shouldn't be this difficult to navigate and to advocate or make change, right? It really should not be this difficult. And I know, again, I'm maybe going on my soapbox now, but my primary concern right now is my child and getting the best care I can possibly get for him, so that he has the best outcomes possible. But that's not to take away from the fact that what I'm doing is above and beyond what I should need to be doing just to get basic support for my child. And I'm done before I get too emotional. It becomes very frustrating.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks again, Ashlie, for your time today, and because we need to hear voices of parents with children, and so I've actually learned a lot listening to you. So thanks again for being a guest on Some Stutter Law. Now, before we close, do you have any closing words you want to say? Oh, and also, before I forget, it is great. It is an honor to have you a member of the Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I don't have too much to say other than I really appreciate you inviting me to do this. I think I've learned lots, and I know putting on the parent hat and then going to the NLSA and putting on that other hat, it's a really it's all, there's just so much work to be done. And so I hope baby steps in the right direction is still forward. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're doing phenomenal things. The group is doing phenomenal things, and I'm looking forward to being part of it for a long time. But yeah, I'll leave it at that and just say thanks very much for the invite today.
Great, and thanks again for your patience with all this technology issues. Okay,
it's all good.
We'll talk again, Ashlie. Take care.
For sure.
Some Stutter Law is hosted by Greg O'Grady. It is produced, recorded, and edited by Paul de Decker, as well as Luca Dinu, who, by the way, wrote this jazzy theme music. Leah Bugden and Alicia Megison command our pages on Instagram and TikTok. Editing assistance was provided by the Labrador Languages Preservation Laboratory, or Labradory, at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. You can listen to or subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. Video versions of each episode are found on our YouTube page. Some Stutterla is a production of the Communication Collaborative. Thanks for listening.